Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Captain Mark Phillips, your Master of Ceremonies for today's event. On behalf of Major General William J. Bender, Commander, United States Air Force Expeditionary Center, we'd like to welcome you to today's panel's discussion. We'd like to extend a special welcome to commanders, chiefs, first sergeant, and members of Joint Base McGuire-Dix-Lakehurst. In late 1944, Germany was unmistakably losing the war. The Soviet Red Army was closing in on the Eastern Front, while strategic Allied bombing was wreaking havoc on German cities. The Italian peninsula had been liberated, and the Allied armies were rapidly advancing through France. Therefore, Adolf Hitler knew that the end was near if something could not be done to slow down the Allied advance. The Battle of the Bulge began with a German attack on the morning of December 16, 1944. Under cover of heavy fog, 38 German divisions struck along a 50-mile front. The German army managed to push American forces back nearly to the Meuse River and surrounded the town of Bastogne in Belgium. At that time, when ordered to surrender Bastogne, Brigadier General Anthony C. McAuliffe famously replied, "Nuts." That same day, the terrible snowstorms that had covered the battlefield broke. Reinforcements were sent by airdrop, while Allied airplanes began their attack on German tanks. Lieutenant General George Patton's Third Army soon broke through the German lines to relieve the defenders at Bastogne. The temperature in January 1945 was the coldest on record, and casualties from exposure to the cold grew as large as losses from the fighting. On January 7, 1945, the German army pulled back most of their forces from the Ardennes, thus ending all German offensive operations. It was the largest land battle of World War II in which the United States directly participated. More than 1 million men fought in the battle. 600,000 Germans, 500,000 Americans, 55,000 British, and casualty estimates from the battle vary widely. American casualties are listed as 70,000 to 81,000, British at 1,400, and German casualties between 60 and 104,000. Additionally, more than 100,000 German prisoners were taken captive. In addition, 800 tanks were lost on each side, and 1,000 German aircraft were destroyed. At this time, I would like to introduce Colonel Spike Owens, Commandant of the Expeditionary Operations School.
General Bender, General Waff, distinguished guests, veterans, Eagles, and members across the Joint Base, thank you for being here today. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you our 4 panelists, distinguished heroes and patriots. I'll begin with Colonel John Marr, who's sitting closest to me. John Marr, the elder statesman of this distinguished panel, was born on 3 May 1920 and grew up in Connecticut. After high school, he attended 2 years of college before leaving school to work with the Army Corps of Engineers. He was drafted in 1942 as a private and soon thereafter was selected to attend Artillery Officer Candidate School. After a time, he transferred to the infantry, specializing in mortars and machine guns. He deployed to Europe and took on duties as rifle platoon leader in the 28th Infantry Division. During the Battle of the Bulge, he was wounded and evacuated to a hospital in England. In March of 1945, he returned to combat operations as a mortar platoon officer. Upon the conclusion of combat operations in Europe, Mr. Marr returned to the States and prepared for a deployment to the Pacific Theater. However, the end of combat operations in the Pacific precluded his deployment. He was then transferred to Fort Lewis, Washington, where he met and married his wife, Irene, who's sitting next to General Bender here today. And Irene at the time was an Army nurse. In 1967, he completed 27 years of service, military service, both active and reserve, and retired at the rank of colonel. After his military career, he went back to college, becoming an educator and high school principal in the local area. John has been a longtime officer and member of the Joint Base chapter of the Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge. He and Irene have been married for 65 years, and they live in Delanco, New Jersey. Please welcome Colonel Retired John Marr. Sitting to John's left is the airman of the group, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Bob Hansen. Bob turned 90 years young yesterday. Bob grew up in Rochester, New York. He enlisted in the U.S. Army Air Corps on 15 January 1942. He was assigned to Merced Army Airfield, California, which some of us are familiar with from days long gone by, as a clerk typist. After inquiring about the aviation cadet program, he had the opportunity to enter pilot training, graduating as a multi-engine pilot in October of 1943, and learned to pilot a B-24 at Davis-Monthan Air Base. He was then assigned to the 458th Bomb Group in England, where he and his crew completed 30 bombing missions. 2 of those missions were in support of D-Day operations, and on Christmas Eve of 1944, he flew 1 mission in support of the Battle of the Bulge. He returned to the U.S. in January 1945 and was assigned to Smyrna Army Airfield as a B-24 instructor. Mr. Hansen separated from the active duty Army in the summer of 1945, but stayed in the reserves. He was recalled in February 1951 for operations in Korea. He was assigned to the Military Air Transport Service, which is a forerunner of what we now know as AMC, and flew various transport aircraft. Mr. Hansen retired in 1977 with nearly 30 years of active service and 5.5 years in the Air Force Reserves. Some of his most memorable missions included bringing the first repatriated Korean War prisoners from Korea to the U.S., and also air evacuation missions returning wounded troops from Korea and Vietnam. After his military career, he was a flight instructor for single-engine civilian aircraft and has been a volunteer for retiree activity programs since 1979. Mr. Hansen resides in North Hanover, just nearby. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant Colonel retired Bob Hansen. All right, moving on to Bob's left, Master Sergeant retired Lloyd Orth. Lloyd Orth was born on 29 December 1922, so 2 weeks from now, Lloyd will have a birthday as well, and grew up in Philadelphia, another local boy done good. He was drafted in the Army on 13 February 1943 and was assigned to the 68th Medical Regiment, where he served as an ambulance driver. Mr. Orth arrived in mainland Europe in December of 1943 and was involved in many operations during the Battle of the Bulge. He also liberated a German concentration camp. He fought all over Europe and was attacked by machine guns in Belgium, narrowly escaping serious injury. Lloyd is also a veteran of the Korean War and retired in 1965 as a Master Sergeant after over 21 years of service. Mr. Orth received a Bronze Star and 2 commendation medals from the Army for his actions. After his retirement, Lloyd was a logistical coordinator for the Minuteman Missile Project and continued in the medical profession at Cooper Hospital over in Camden. Besides holding offices with both the Joint Base Chapter of the Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge, he has served as a VFW post commander at the Air Victory Museum, which is a worthwhile trip in Lumberton. Mr. Orth and his wife Teresa, who couldn't be here with us this morning, have 5 children and they live in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Please welcome Master Sergeant retired Lloyd Orth. And last but not least, the youngster of this distinguished panel, Sergeant Art Goldschmidt. Art was born on 24 August 1925 and grew up in New York City. He was drafted in the Army on 20 November 1943 and was assigned to the 87th Infantry Division Golden Acorn, where he served as an anti-tank gun crewman, also known in Art's term lexicon as a bazooka man. Mr. Goldschmidt arrived in mainland Europe in October of 1944 and fought in many engagements in the Battle of the Bulge. In January of 1945, he was injured when his truck convoy struck an enemy anti-tank mine, killing 16 out of 19 total members of his formation. Art earned a battlefield promotion for his actions in combat. He is a recipient of the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart, and was honorably discharged in 1945. Art then attended college and became an electrical engineer, just like General Bender, with the Radio Corporation of America, better known as RCA, where he worked for 26 years. After he retired from RCA in 1982, Art worked as a machinist and toolmaker. Mr. Goldschmidt is also a longtime officer and member of the Joint Base Chapter of the Veterans of the Battle of the Bulge. He and his late wife, Bernice, had 2 children, Michael and Nina. and Art lives in Moorestown, New Jersey. So all of these gentlemen are local boys done good. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Sergeant Art Goldschmidt. All right, we will now proceed with a short video presentation, and then Captain Phillips will moderate a panel discussion followed by questions and answers. So we look forward to really why we're all here today, to hear from the veterans. Thank you very much.
During the Bulge, command broke down, supplies broke down, morale broke down, communications broke down, everything broke down. It was every man for himself. We were inadequately clothed. We didn't have rubber overshoes. We didn't have overcoats. We didn't have gloves. We didn't have scarves. My boots were so bad, I would strip newspapers and drapery off of these bombed out houses and wrap my feet in it. You were having trouble breathing because the snow was suffocating you. And consequently, we lost a lot of men who froze to death.
Well, gentlemen, I'd like to start by just setting the stage for World War II and your contributions to it. Colonel Meyer, I want to start with you, sir. I would like to ask you, what do you think the mood of the country was right after the attack at Pearl Harbor, and what was your particular response to that attack?
I think in order to understand the Battle of Bulge, you have to understand the layout. I was in an infantry regiment, had 9 rifle companies, 180 men in each company. We were spread out over 10 miles along the Our River. Now, no magic army can defend that much territory. The name of the river was Our, O-U-R. The old colonel would come by, he'd say, "Private, what's the name of that river?" He'd say, "The Our, sir." He said, "Don't let those damn Germans forget it. It's our river." Now, so we had 6 companies spread out over these 10 miles. Across that river, unknown to us, because this was a rest area. When the division was decimated, we were sent there to get replacements and train for the next engagement. Across the river, with our German friends, very peaceful people until the middle of December. Across that river was the 5th Panzer Army of General Hasso Monteuffel. He had 4 tank divisions and 5 infantry divisions. Each division between 12 and 18,000 men. And our little old regiment, our 2nd Battalion had been placed back in Division Reserve. So we had 2 battalions up there. Now, during the day we train. At night, after supper, we go to bed. Very few patrols. In the meantime, the Germans with their little rubber boats would come across to find out our weak points, which were not very hard to find. So on the 16th of December, they came in force.
Thank you, sir.
I don't